Adolf Hitler's rise to power and the spark that ignited World War II form one of the darkest and most complex chapters in human history. After World War I ended in 1918, Germany was left broken, its economy shattered, its people humiliated, and its spirit crushed under the heavy terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty forced Germany to accept total blame for the war, pay impossible reparations, surrender valuable territories, and reduce its army to a mere shadow of its former power. Millions of Germans fell into poverty, factories closed, money lost value, and hunger filled the streets. Out of this despair emerged a man who promised salvation: Adolf Hitler, a failed painter turned soldier who had served in the trenches of World War I. He was filled with rage against those he blamed for Germany's defeat: the Allied powers, the politicians who signed the Versailles Treaty, and the Jewish community, whom he accused of betrayal. Hitler joined a small nationalist group called the German Workers' Party, which he transformed into the National Socialist German Workers' Party Nazi Party. With his fiery speeches and unmatched charisma, Hitler promised the German people a rebirth, a Third Reich that would restore their pride, expand their lands, and make Germany unstoppable once again. By 1933, Germany's democracy had collapsed, and Hitler was appointed Chancellor. Within months, he dismantled all political opposition, outlawed rival parties, silenced the press, and established a terrifying dictatorship ruled by fear and propaganda. He created the Gestapo secret police to crush dissent and began spreading racist ideology through schools and media. The Nazi regime glorified war, obedience, and racial purity, preaching that Germans were the superior Aryan race destined to rule the world. Jews, communists, Roma, and others were labeled as undesirable and slowly stripped of their rights, jobs, and property. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws were introduced, marking the beginning of the legal persecution of Jews. At the same time, Hitler defied the Treaty of Versailles by secretly rebuilding the German military. He reintroduced conscription, built new tanks and warplanes, and expanded the navy, actions that openly violated international agreements, yet the world powers remained silent, hoping to avoid another war. By 1936, Hitler's confidence grew. He sent troops into the Rhineland, a demilitarized region forbidden to German forces. France and Britain did nothing, encouraging him further. In 1938, he annexed Austria in what he called the Anschluss, claiming that Germans everywhere should be united under one nation. The Western powers, still desperate for peace, did not intervene. Later that same year, Hitler demanded control of Czechoslovakia's Sudetenland, arguing that it was home to ethnic Germans. Britain and France, fearing another war, signed the Munich Agreement, handing him the territory in the hope that he would stop his expansion, but appeasement only fed his ambition. By March 1939, Hitler broke his promise and invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia without resistance. The world began to realize that Hitler could not be trusted. His next target was Poland, a land he considered vital for German living space, or Lebensraum. Before launching the attack, Hitler secured his eastern flank by signing a shocking secret deal with his greatest ideological enemy, Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, signed on August 23, 1939, was a non-aggression agreement that secretly divided Eastern Europe between Germany and the Soviet Union. The world was stunned. On September 1, 1939, Hitler's forces invaded Poland, unleashing a new and terrifying kind of warfare, the Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. German tanks, planes, and troops struck with overwhelming speed and coordination, crushing Polish defenses within weeks. The skies roared with the thunder of Luftwaffe bombers, cities burned, and civilians fled in terror. On September 3, Britain and France declared war on Germany, marking the official start of World War II. Within days, the Nazi war machine advanced across Poland from the west while Soviet forces attacked from the east, dividing the country according to their secret pact. The Polish army was destroyed, and by the end of September, Poland was completely conquered. Hitler's armies now stood victorious and unstoppable. Over the next few months, Germany turned its attention to Western Europe. In April 1940, German forces invaded Denmark and Norway, then struck with lightning speed into Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. In just 6 weeks, the once great French army fell, and on June 14, 1940, Nazi soldiers marched through the streets of Paris. Europe was under Hitler's boots. Only Britain remained defiant, led by Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who vowed never to surrender. But while German tanks rolled across Europe, an even darker war had begun behind the scenes. The Nazi regime launched brutal campaigns against Jews and political opponents, establishing concentration camps where prisoners were enslaved, tortured, and killed. Hitler's propaganda machine filled every home with lies about racial superiority and Germany's destiny to rule. Across Germany, factories worked day and night to build weapons for a new world order under Nazi control. The people of Europe watched in fear as the map of the continent changed before their eyes. By the end of 1940, Hitler stood at the height of his power. He controlled nearly all of Western Europe, had crushed every enemy in his path, and believed himself invincible. Yet in his arrogance, he was already planning the next and most dangerous step: an invasion of the Soviet Union, the largest nation on Earth. The world was on the brink of even greater bloodshed, and the flames of war were about to spread beyond Europe's borders, consuming millions more lives in the years to come. By mid-1941, Adolf Hitler stood at the height of his power. His armies controlled nearly all of Europe, from the icy shores of Norway to the sunny fields of France. But his hunger for domination was far from satisfied. His next goal was his most ambitious and dangerous plan yet: to destroy the Soviet Union and seize its vast lands, oil, and resources. On June 22, 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history. Over 3 million German soldiers, supported by thousands of tanks, aircraft, and vehicles, stormed across an 1,800-mile front into Soviet territory. The Nazi war machine moved swiftly, crushing entire Soviet divisions, capturing millions of prisoners, and sweeping deep into Russian lands. Hitler believed the Soviet Union would collapse in a few weeks, but he was wrong. The Soviets, led by Joseph Stalin, refused to surrender. As the Germans advanced, the weather turned against them. The brutal Russian winter froze tanks, jammed weapons, and killed soldiers by the thousands. The Nazis reached the outskirts of Moscow, but the Soviets counterattacked fiercely, forcing them back. Operation Barbarossa failed to deliver a knockout blow, and for the first time, Hitler's army began to bleed heavily. While the Eastern Front turned into a frozen hell, war expanded across the globe. On December 7, 1941, Germany's ally Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, a U.S. naval base in Hawaii, destroying battleships and killing thousands of Americans. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan and soon after, on Germany and Italy. What began as a European conflict now exploded into a worldwide war. Hitler, confident in German strength, declared war on America, underestimating its immense industrial power. The conflict now spanned every ocean and continent, from the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of Asia, from the frozen steppes of Russia to the skies above London. By 1942, the tide of war began to shift. In the east, Hitler launched a massive summer offensive toward the Soviet city of Stalingrad, determined to crush Soviet resistance and seize control of the oil fields in the Caucasus. The Battle of Stalingrad became one of the most brutal and deadly battles in human history. Entire city blocks were reduced to ashes, soldiers fought street by street, building by building, sometimes with knives and bare hands. In the end, the Soviet army surrounded the German Sixth Army, trapping more than 300,000 troops. After months of starvation and freezing temperatures, the Germans surrendered in February 1943, a crushing defeat that shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility. Meanwhile, in North Africa, German General Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox, fought fierce battles against the British. But the Allied forces, strengthened by American troops, defeated Rommel at the Battle of El Alamein, forcing the Axis out of Africa by 1943. The Allies then invaded Italy, capturing Sicily and overthrowing Benito Mussolini. Hitler's fascist ally Italy switched sides, joining the Allies, while German forces fought to hold northern Italy. By 1944, the Allies were preparing for the most daring operation of the war, the liberation of Western Europe. On June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, hundreds of thousands of Allied troops landed on the beaches of Normandy, France, under heavy German fire. The skies filled with Allied planes, and the sea was covered with ships. After days of brutal fighting, the Allies broke through German defenses and began pushing inland, liberating Paris by August 1944. At the same time, the Soviet Union launched massive offensives from the east, crushing German lines and advancing toward Berlin. Hitler's empire was collapsing from all sides. But even as defeat loomed, the Nazis unleashed more horror. The world began to uncover the truth of the Holocaust, the systematic genocide of Europe's Jews and other targeted groups. In concentration camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Dachau, millions were murdered through starvation, forced labor, gas chambers, and medical experiments. Innocent men, women, and children were transported in cattle cars, stripped of everything, and slaughtered. It remains one of the darkest crimes in human history, a wound that time can never heal. By early 1945, the Allies closed in on Germany. Cities like Berlin, Hamburg, and Dresden were reduced to ruins by relentless Allied bombing raids. On the Eastern Front, Soviet troops crushed the last German defenses and entered Berlin in April. Refusing to surrender, Hitler retreated to his underground bunker beneath the city. As Soviet shells rained down, he gave his final orders, married Eva Braun, and on April 30, 1945, committed suicide, ending his life in the same madness that had destroyed millions. On May 8, 1945, Germany officially surrendered, marking victory in Europe Day VE Day. Crowds celebrated across the Allied nations, but the war was not yet over in the Pacific. Japan continued to fight fiercely. American forces captured island after island, but Japanese soldiers refused to surrender, leading to horrific battles like Iwo Jima and Okinawa, where hundreds of thousands died. To end the war swiftly and avoid a bloody invasion of Japan, the United States made a world-changing decision. On August 6, 1945, a U.S. bomber dropped the first atomic bomb, called Little Boy, on the city of Hiroshima. In an instant, tens of thousands were killed, and the city turned to fire and ash. 3 days later, on August 9, a second bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki, killing tens of thousands more. The devastating power of these weapons shocked the world. Finally, on August 15, 1945, Japan announced its surrender, and the formal signing took place on September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri, ending World War II after 6 years of unimaginable destruction. The cost of the war was beyond comprehension. More than 70 million people were dead: soldiers, civilians, men, women, and children. The Soviet Union lost over 27 million lives, China around 15 to 20 million, Germany about 6 to 7 million, Poland over 5 million, Japan nearly 3 million, and the United States more than 400,000. Entire cities were erased, economies were ruined, and millions were left homeless. The world emerged from the ashes forever changed. The Allied powers led by the United States, Soviet Union, Britain, France, and China stood victorious, while the Axis powers Germany, Italy, and Japan lay in ruin. Out of the destruction came new beginnings. The United Nations was formed to maintain peace, and two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, rose to dominate the world, leading to the long Cold War that followed. The Second World War ended the rule of empires, reshaped continents, and changed the course of human history forever, a grim reminder of how pride, hatred, and unchecked ambition can consume the entire world in fire. After the dust of World War II finally settled in 1945, the world stood in ruins. Cities were turned into ashes, millions were dead or missing, and empires that had ruled for centuries had collapsed. But the end of the war wasn't truly peaceful. It was the beginning of a new global order, shaped by fear, rivalry, and rebuilding. The victors, mainly the United States, Soviet Union, Britain, France, and China, gathered to decide the future of the shattered world. Germany was divided into 4 occupation zones, controlled separately by the US, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. The German capital, Berlin, was also split in the same way, even though it lay deep inside Soviet-controlled territory. Hitler's Nazi Party was outlawed, and its top leaders were put on trial during the Nuremberg trials 1945 to 1946, where they were held responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Many were executed or imprisoned for their roles in the Holocaust and the devastation of Europe. Meanwhile, Japan, after its surrender, came under U.S. occupation led by General Douglas MacArthur. The American forces disbanded Japan's military, introduced democratic reforms, and rebuilt its economy. Within years, Japan transformed from a war-torn empire into a peaceful, industrial powerhouse. In Europe, the United States launched the Marshall Plan, a massive economic aid program that helped rebuild war-damaged nations and prevent the spread of communism. Billions of dollars were poured into Western Europe, restoring cities, industries, and hope. In contrast, Eastern Europe fell under Soviet control, where Joseph Stalin established communist governments loyal to Moscow. This division marked the beginning of the Cold War, a long, tense rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, not fought directly with armies, but through politics, espionage, propaganda, and nuclear threats. The creation of the United Nations (UN) in 1945 symbolized the world's desire to prevent another global catastrophe. Its mission was to maintain peace, promote human rights, and help rebuild nations. Yet peace remained fragile. The Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb in 1949, ending America's monopoly on nuclear weapons and beginning an arms race that terrified the world. Both superpowers built thousands of nuclear bombs, enough to destroy the planet many times over. Alliances were formed: NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, in 1949, led by the US and its Western allies, and later the Warsaw Pact in 1955, led by the Soviet Union and its satellite states. The war's human cost continued long after the fighting ended. Millions of refugees wandered through ruined cities looking for families that no longer existed. Entire populations were displaced, borders were redrawn, new nations emerged while old ones vanished. The Holocaust survivors carried scars that could never heal, and the world finally began to confront the horrors of genocide. The phrase never again became a solemn vow to humanity, though history would sadly prove it wrong many times afterward. Technologically, World War II had also changed everything. The race to develop better weapons and strategies led to advancements in jet engines, radar, rocketry, medicine, and computers. German rocket scientist Wernher von Braun, who had designed the deadly V-2 missiles, was brought to America to help develop space technology, laying the foundation for the NASA space program that would one day land humans on the moon. The war also accelerated the end of colonial empires. Weakened European powers like Britain and France could no longer hold their vast colonies, and soon after the war, countries across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East began to fight for and win their independence. Culturally and psychologically, the war left deep wounds. The sheer scale of destruction, the Holocaust, and the atomic bombings forced humanity to question its morality, progress, and purpose. In art, literature, and cinema, a new era of reflection and realism began. Films, books, and museums around the world told stories of courage, sacrifice, and horror, reminding future generations of the price of hate and power. As decades passed, the world rebuilt itself, stronger but more cautious. Germany split into East and West Germany, separated by the Berlin Wall in 1961, a symbol of division between freedom and dictatorship, democracy and communism. It stood for nearly 3 decades until 1989, when it finally fell, marking the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a new era of unity. Japan, once devastated by atomic fire, became one of the leading economies in the world. The United States rose as a global superpower, while the Soviet Union dominated Eastern Europe until its eventual collapse in 1991. The memory of World War II remains alive even today, a story of unimaginable loss but also of incredible resilience. It reshaped nations, destroyed tyrannies, and birthed new powers. It gave birth to the modern world, the age of nuclear weapons, space exploration, and international diplomacy. It taught humanity the cost of hatred, the danger of unchecked ambition, and the importance of peace. From the ashes of Berlin to the silence of Hiroshima, the echoes of that war still whisper a warning, that the greatest threat to humanity is not nature or technology but ourselves.